Okay, here we are. This is I think our fourth session, but we'll figure all that mathy stuff out later. This is Adam Seaman with Positive Leadership, and I am here with Jennifer Downing with Leadership South Coast. Hello.
Hello.
So in this episode, we're gonna check in with our participants and see what happened with them during the purpose chapter or purpose session, which happened when did that happen?
Last month in March. Well, earlier this month.
Earlier
We're not
this
in
month.
March yet, but yeah.
Good. And so on our last call, we were talking about some ideas. And so now we're going to hear how it went. And then we're going to talk about advocacy as the next capacity in preparation for the next one. So take it away, Jennifer. How did things go?
So things, again, went great. Our March topic for our session was education. And so it really aligned perfectly with the capacity of purpose, particularly in our region where on the south coast of Massachusetts, we're really having a hard time with achievement levels and dropout rates. And this has to do, I think, because we've got two major older industrial cities in our region. So really having a hard time with education. And so all of the speakers that we met that day, we met 3 superintendents from 3 different districts, all really talked about, and not without even being that prodded about talk about purpose, basically said that if they didn't have a strong sense of purpose driving them to do this kind of work, they would have quit years ago, because your heart and your soul has to genuinely be in it in order to work in education. So in terms of sort of the aligning with your topic area, it just went really smoothly this month. And then with our discussion, we had about an hour. It kicked off the day. We did an overview of the chapter. Actually, first I kind of recapped from the month before and asked how people were sort of seeing authenticity play out in their personal life and their professional life, and also in their project work that we're doing. So I got a little bit of input on that. A couple of people had done some of the field guide exercises. Just spent about 5 minutes doing that, and then we jumped into the purpose chapter. I had some questions that I had given them before so I had reflection questions. So we kind of kicked it off with that. That just kind of started the discussion. And it seemed like where people gravitated to was the PALM method. We talked a lot about, it wasn't intended, but we seemed to really stick there for a while of the purpose, outcomes, and methods that you talk about in the chapter. And I actually didn't have a video or anything lined up this month. I just was going to go with discussion. And because it landed there, I actually paused in the middle of everything, and I got YouTube going in the room, and we watched Simon Sinek's, is it Sinek?
Yeah, Sinek.
Sinek's How Great Leaders Inspire Action, which actually was in the field guide. I just pulled that up quickly because he talks so much about, he doesn't call it the PALM method, he calls it the
golden circle.
Right, but there's so much alignment there.
And they're the same thing almost.
Yeah, and then he just encapsulates, I think, the whole chapter so very well in that talk. So I kind of just went with the moment and took 20 minutes, and we watched that video. And I actually checked in with the group. I'm like, there's this video. Has anyone seen it? And I think one person raised their hand.
I'm surprised, because that's one of the most popular TED videos.
Yeah, I had seen it before too. So no one had seen it, and so I ran that. And that just left for a lot of discussion too after the video was over. So it went really, really well.
That sounds so good. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I heard a lot of, in terms of personal purpose and situational purpose, examples, people wanting to share examples from those 2 places. And a lot of, I'm still not sure what my personal purpose is in life, still kind of trying to figure that out. And a lot of, in terms of situational purpose, a handful of people saying, yeah, I was once in a job, or I was once serving on this board, or this more of that professional setting where
Mhm.
I was being called upon because of my skill set, or because of maybe my status in the community or what have you, but I really wasn't there in an authentic way, and my purpose
Mhm.
wasn't being um, used in the way it should. So yeah, so it was really good. Excellent
I hear,
discussion.
I'm so glad to hear that. I love several things. I love how you went back to authenticity first to kind of see, what people might have experienced after the class day on authenticity, and get some stories that way. Which what you're doing is you're just kind of building in those connecting points, all throughout the year. Which is one of the beauties of this model, is that they all interconnect. I mean, authenticity will connect to every single capacity.
Yeah.
Purpose will connect every single capacity. So it really becomes this nice, whatever this gesture I'm making is, it becomes like that. And
Connects really well. It flows from month to month, it seems already. I'm only a few in, but really flowing well from month to month. And without even trying, aligning so well with the topic
yeah,
areas. So jumping to next month, where we're going to be talking about advocacy. Our topic for the day is environmental sustainability. So we're going to be talking about energy issues that day, sustainable agriculture happening. We have a huge the Buzzards Bay, which is a huge water source here locally, and lots of conservation and advocacy work around the Buzzards Bay. So it's just going to align really well again, without having to try to align. So I think that's kind of cool too.
I think that's really cool. And so let's pretend that environmental day was on your purpose day, and that your education day was on advocacy day. Like, you would have maybe a little different doorways into each topic, but it would still work out.
Still work. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess my point in bringing that up is just let positive leadership flow as it flows, and it will align instead of having to work really hard to make everything align.
That's such an important point. And yeah, that's exactly where I was with you on that. Is the order of the capacities is really important, because before you could talk about purpose, having that conversation about authenticity really kind of tees up or sets a stage for personal purpose. People saying, I don't know what my personal purpose is. Well, yeah, most people should probably don't. And authenticity is necessary to kind of tap into it. And then the same relationship exists with advocacy. If you don't have a purpose, then you are not as powerful of an advocate. And then I guess one last question. I do want to get into the advocacy stuff, but was there any conversation about social force there, or did that kind of fade away this month?
No, we did talk about social force during the review piece in the beginning, and it was part of our. I'm sorry, I can't remember specific examples, but we definitely did talk about it with some of the examples that Sinek brings up in his video about how Martin Luther King and Apple have a lot in common in different ways, and how they were able to mobilize. And so it did come up in the discussion again. So.
Very good. Yeah. And so I love one thing you could talk about with every capacity, and I'd love to actually have anybody watching this kind of try it out, would be to always have the question, how does this capacity amplify social force? And like that could almost be like a standard question that like you talked about the pre-reading questions. That would be a great question you can have for every capacity. How does this capacity amplify your social force, which is kind of like really what the whole model is about. The whole positive leadership model is about increasing social force, because that's what I think of as leadership, not a title and not a trait, but social force. So, by hammering that by the end of the year, then I think your participants will really have a different way to understand leadership than what most programs are teaching.
Right.
Not that it's better, but it is. But it's, but it would be new. It would be something different that I think is legitimate in the minds of at least the people that I've had feedback from, that, oh no, this is a really different way to understand leadership. And I wouldn't have gotten that if I didn't go through Leadership South Coast or,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And one last thing on the Simon Sinek thing. When I saw his video, I had already developed the POM model, Purpose Outcomes Methods. And then I saw that and I just had that immediate professional jealousy, because this thing has millions of views and nobody's, only, people in our programs are learning about POM. And I'm not saying that, that POM is better than the Golden Circle, but it is. There's just a lot more to it. Like the POM becomes a planning model and an alignment tool and all of that.
I was just gonna say that since I've read Positive Leadership and since I've been, working in the field guides along with the class, that to me has been so tremendously valuable. And I've been case by case, applying this to in situations that I wouldn't have before. Every meeting agenda, every, it's like, what's the purpose? What's the purpose? And going back to that before anything else. And we're actually moving into a strategic planning process this year. Leadership South Coast is. We haven't done one in 3 years, so it's time. And I'm planning on bringing this in when we start that process of, we do have a mission statement, we have a vision, but we've never as an organization really said, but what's our purpose?
Yeah.
We kind of, okay, we do this leadership program and this is why, but what's the purpose? So that to me was so valuable in that chapter. That one little piece. What's our little piece? It's a big piece, but that one principle that's outlined was really, really helpful for me. So glad. Yeah, I just left a meeting this morning and we used POM. I use it to align myself with other people. I use it as a framework. I pretend it's just a way to kind of create an agenda for us. But what I'm really doing is making sure that other person and me, we're seeing things the same way. Is your why and my why the same? They don't have to be, but we should know if they're not. Is your outcome and my outcome co-habitable? I don't know, whatever. Copacetic, whatever. And then are the methods, are we aligned on how to go about doing something? So I use it for planning and for aligning. And so anyway, if I were to write a book on it, I would call it Alignment and Action, because it's about those two things that we really need. But we'll move on. We got to get to advocacy. Yes,
but I love how things are going, and I love hearing how your participants are responding to all this, and just how you're bringing yourself to the material. And that's so important, is just do it like you would do it. And I think that's what makes it engaging. Yeah. I also want to say that if I got an email from one of our programs and she said, our participants love the content, but the class discussion is just flat. We just have 2 or 3 people who are talking, and everybody else is silent, and I don't know how to interpret that, and it feels like I have to pull responses out of people. Yeah. And so that can happen, and it may have nothing to do with the facilitation, although it might. But it may just be the personality of the class, or you have 2 or 3 dominant people in the class and then everybody just defers to them. They don't want to compete with those dominant personalities or these extroverted personalities. So I will work with that program on how to refine the facilitation of it so that it actually always is engaging. Because it sounds like your conversations just are really happening pretty.
Yeah, they are. So far, they've been pretty robust discussions, and we survey every month, every day, and so far, so good. I mean, I'm pretty much asking, how valuable are you finding the discussions and the content to your development as a leader, is basically the question I put out there. And, 5 being very valuable, one not so much. And we're getting 4s and 5s
Great.
so far. So
Excellent.
seem to be well received.
We're going to keep that going, I hope.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's do this. Let's kind of get into advocacy. And my thought was I would just share with you, talk through the PowerPoint with you, and then any ideas, like feel free to interrupt me at any point. So I will get this going here. Here is the PowerPoint, and you always can get the PowerPoints, the chapters, the field guides that you mentioned. You can always get them in the resource library of Positive Leadership. So just a reminder for anybody watching this. And so basically, I'm just going to share a couple of thoughts. This is, and yeah, what I said we'll do. You interrupt me at any point. So what I like to do is I kind of like to start with this model, which is just kind of like the framework of the whole piece all in one. I want to turn this into more of a poster with more details, and then, you know, have this available for you guys. So maybe you could have it up in your classroom or something, or even make like a little something for your participants so they can have this a more defined version of this map. So anyway, cool. So, you know, here you have that's authenticity. This is purpose, and now the megaphone is the advocacy. Now, the first thing I want to say about this, advocacy used to be called, I used to call it something else. The name of the chapter was sponsorship. That was my word, that you're sponsoring something. And I got a lot of feedback that people wanted to call it advocacy. So I got on board with that, with the last rewrite of Positive Leadership. But the idea is the same thing. It's holding something up to other people so they can see it. And you're saying, this is important. This matters. This is why you should pay attention to this. And so it's the same idea regardless of the word we use, but you're advocating for it. You're sponsoring it. You're lending your own personal brand, your own personal reputation to something. And we often don't even think about it. You know, like if I wear a t-shirt and it's a t-shirt of XYZ company and their logo, and then that company, what if they have practices that like they use, you know, child labor, or they are, you know, sponsoring a government that's oppressing their people, then am I advocating, am I sponsoring those behaviors? I'm not saying yes. I'm not saying no. I think it's a good conversation to say, when I wear somebody's logo, or an athlete, when I'm holding up, let's say, Michael Jordan, or who's the Tour de France guy? Lance Armstrong.
Lance Armstrong. Thank you.
Thank you, because you helped me get there. Together, it takes two. It takes two brains.
Yeah, right. Okay.
You know, so yeah, and so when Lance Armstrong admitted to, you know, the doping or the whatever, like, oh gosh, we don't want to hold him up as an example anymore.
Right.
We're not sponsoring him. We're not advocating him. We don't want him holding up our product to the rest of the world. So, you know, you think about that, you know, advertisers on a show, you know, it's like, oh, do I want to be associated with this advertiser? You know, that comes up every once in a while. So, you know, that's all built into this topic of advocacy. But of course, what we're using it for is community leadership. And it's about advocating for a cause in our community, a bill to, or some kind of law that we're voting on. I mean, you know, that's where advocacy comes in, and or this is a cause that I care about, and and here's why it matters. So that's what we're talking about here. So that's why the subtitle is Advocacy: Declaring What Matters. And of course, we're going to have all sorts of differing viewpoints on what matters. And And that gets into some of the potential struggles we face as leaders. What if I'm advocating for something, but somebody else is threatened by it, and then they attack me? And this is why resilience comes up as the next chapter.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that makes sense.
So now that you've done the purpose chapter, maybe participants can see that, oh, wow, Adam uses this in his PowerPoints. It's how, what's the purpose of the chapter? Well, it's to articulate the real work of leaders and how they shape their communities through advocacy and their own personal example, which is a form of advocacy. So it's pretty, I'm sure there's better ways to say that, but that's in essence the purpose. And if that's the purpose, what would it look like if I succeeded? What if my purpose for this chapter worked well? What would the outcomes be? And again, I could make it more in depth, but simply speaking, that I want to increase your ability to effectively appraise what is worthy of advocacy and your skill to mobilize other people in service of that advocacy. So that's what I want for the reader or for your participants from this chapter. And then I also like to use little quotes, and this one here, if you expect those below you, and I do have a problem with that language, those below you, that's not really my view of leadership, so I have to be careful there. I don't really like that. If you expect those below you to support your leadership and step in the breach when needed, they will need to understand your strategy, your methods, your rules. That requires repeated restatements of your principles and consistent adherence to them. So it's that latter part of this quote that I think really captures that advocacy. They have to know that your advocacy is authentic. There's a quote I really like that, or just kind of a principle that I've learned and used, and it guides me, and I've shared it with others, is that by the time you're sick of saying something is about the time people are starting to hear it. Mm-hmm. And so, sometimes we're like, I already said that once. So communication happened. No, communication didn't happen. Information happened. The process of articulating something happened. But communication is message sent equals message received.
Right.
So I think that's just a really good leadership principle. Sometimes that message isn't received until you really feel like you're sick of saying it. And then they're like, oh yeah, what you said, that you should have said that to me sooner. And you're like, yeah, I did. But you don't see the world from inside my head, just as I don't see the world from inside your head. So you might have missed out on it. Mm-hmm. I've watched a movie a second time and I'm like, I don't remember seeing that scene in there. They must have just added that since the person saw it, like it couldn't be that I missed it. Anyway, so then what I do, and is I do what you do. Let's review what we did last time. What are the 3 types of purpose? What are the 3 requirements of purpose? Describe the POM model. And you know what I don't like about these so far is it sounds like it's a quiz, and I don't need it to be that way. So maybe ask more of what was your experience with purpose? Did you have any experience with original, authentic, or personal purpose, or situational purpose, or anybody use the POM model? Anybody find a use for it?
I'll just add that after our program day, like a few days later, when I send out my survey, and that's when I've been sending out the field guide. So after the class, right. And I just pick out a couple of exercises that I really like. Mm-hmm. And so this month I actually said in the note, to explore personal purpose, then you might want to try the plate management exercise. If you want to explore situational purpose, try aligning purpose, outcomes, and methods exercise. So I give them a couple, just to, hopefully by, as a nudge to, do them, and then, and when we come back together next month, I'm going to reference those particular 2 and say, so who did this one? Did anyone do this one? Or did you do a different one?
I love it. I am so glad to hear that. And so for anybody watching this, I think using the field guide after the class day is great. And especially the way you did it, where you're highlighting one or two activities, but still making it okay for them to do a different activity. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I just want to say that as of now, March 2016, that is in its first draft. Like, that was a new idea that we just implemented this year. And so I plan on expanding those field guides. I'd love feedback on how to improve it. If somebody thinks that an exercise is really dumb, let me know. If somebody thinks that an exercise isn't well explained, let me know. If someone really loves an exercise, let me know. Or if you have an idea, let me know, and we can continually make that a more useful tool for your participants. So yeah, I love how you're using the field guide as a way to give a follow-up exercise for the session you just had, and then using it to kind of warm up for the next session and get people's minds back into the positive leadership model and share stories and so forth. Mm-hmm. Great. So yeah, do you use this like little pre-assessment? This is at the beginning of every chapter.
I know. Well, so I personally take them when I read the chapters, but I haven't yet integrated it into the class, and I really feel like it's only because of a matter of time.
Exactly.
I've got 1 hour for positive leadership each class day, and even that is sometimes so hard to squeeze in. So that's my only reason for not doing it. But maybe this month I should try it.
It's something you can weave in just to add variety. But I think it's such a great problem to have, that there's more content and you get to pick, and that's what, you get to decide as the facilitator. There's no one right way to do it. So if you use this, great. If you don't use this, but you do, like however you do it, I think that's what's most important. So these questions, you could talk through with them as a group. You can have them do a table discussion, or you just have them answer these questions or rate themselves on these statements as their own personal activity. Just know that they're there. And I think I said this last time, but just in case, these questions, the order of these statements is sort of like an outline for the chapter. The chapter kind of follows this. And the seventh question is always going to be, how do you use that capacity to benefit other people? Mm-hmm. And the first question is just, getting their mind around this overall capacity and the concept of it. So, and then it flows from there. So anyway, it's not a scientific survey. It doesn't mean, if you answer everything low that you're bad. And if you answer everything at 7, I would be more worried if you answered 7s on all of these than if you answered 1s on all of these, to be honest. So what kind of things can a leader advocate? And these are just examples. They can advocate people. Like, you promote a person, you tout someone's strengths or capabilities, products and services, ideas, dialogue. Are there any others? That's not an exhaustive list. I mean, I could sponsor dialogue. I can advocate for dialogue. I can advocate a mood. I can say, guys, we should feel gratitude, even though things look bleak. Here is something that genuinely we could feel grateful for. Sometimes we inadvertently advocate a mood of anger or resentment or irritation, and we don't know that, because we haven't been thoughtful about what it is we're advocating. But we're advocating it. If I'm short-tempered with somebody, and I'm advocating that, even if I didn't intend to do it, I'm just tired. I'm just, frustrated. So yeah. Oh no, leave him there.
No, he shouldn't be on the table.
Well, he's advocating for climbing on furniture. That's fine. And it's not my house, so.
You know what? She was just advocating at the door to go out, and I was ignoring her. So she really wanted to make her statement now by jumping on the table. So
there you go.
I had to listen. Sorry, go on.
No, I love that happened, actually. So, all right. So those are the kinds of things we could advocate. And to be mindful of it is really tricky. When I was in college, I was in a fraternity. I don't know why I'm like sheepishly admitting I was in a fraternity, like it was a bad thing. But when I was a pledge, and there was this older, member of the fraternity, we had to interview the members, and this one guy, he would always say something to the pledges and no one understood what he meant. And he would say, pay attention to your attention. We're like, what does that mean? And what we came up with was that, when we're wearing our fraternity letters on campus, people are going to give us their attention. They're going to pay attention to that. And if I'm acting like a jerk while wearing those Greek letters, then it's going to reflect on everybody else who wears those letters. So that we should be mindful of the attention we bring to ourselves and what it is we advocate. And I don't know where things are going to turn out like a year from now when somebody watches this, but right now we are in the presidential primaries of 2016, and there's a lot of ideas being advocated, some very deliberately advocated, some accidentally being advocated, and it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes.
It sure will.
We'll leave it. Yeah, we'll be apolitical about it and just be like, where will this go? We don't have any opinion. We're neutral people. So this is sort of the model that really, I think, makes sense for advocacy. First of all, is this idea of building a platform, which was a new word for me because there's a book by Michael Hyatt called something about platform. I don't have it right here in front of me, but I didn't understand what he meant. Or when I went to get a book published, one of the questions the publisher asks is, what is your platform? And what they mean by that is, what is it that elevates you such that people should want to hear what you have to say? And if you don't have a platform, and a platform could be a following that you've already cultivated, a large Twitter base or social media following, or your platform could be a message that is really important and unique that no one else is sharing, and this should be heard. So your platform is, why should somebody listen to you? What is the evidence for which you should speak? Because nobody is allowed to just get up on the platform. Like you invite speakers to a platform because they've sort of built up a reputation as someone who could speak or someone who has a message. So this idea of platform is kind of like a stage, but more in a conceptual way. It's more of like the worthiness of your message or of you as a speaker. I think it was Cicero, the famous Roman orator, who would say, a good rhetorician is a good man speaking well. A good human being, someone with a good heart and a good soul, who also has skill in voicing that message. So if you're a bad person speaking well, then you shouldn't be allowed a platform. Or if you're a good person speaking poorly, maybe you shouldn't be allowed the platform either. So I just think that these are some interesting ideas. Those aren't in the book at all. I'm just kind of, ideating now. But for me, these were the 4 pillars that I think make this platform, that increase your platform. And so we can go through one by one. But this is kind of, each chapter I sort of have my model, the 4 aspects of authenticity: self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-development, and self-assertion. And then purpose, I have original purpose, situational, personal purpose, and situational purpose. And in advocacy, the core model is this: clarity. It starts at the bottom. I know people go top down, but you're building a platform. And so clarity, do you know why you care about something? Do you understand the issue? Are you clear on why it matters to you? And do you know the issues surrounding it, or the controversy, or the different viewpoints around it, or the research behind it? How clear are you on this issue? It's hard to advocate if you're like, well, I feel like this should be the new rule, people, that's an expression I hear people use all the time. I feel like this should be this. And you're like, well, how you feel is kind of irrelevant. should it be this thing? And what evidence do you have for it? So clarity, then conviction, then credibility, and then building a compelling case. Now, this order is sort of malleable. This order makes sense in my mind that first I need clarity, and then now that I know what the thing is, how convicted am I? How invested am I? And then how credible am I to others? And then do I have the compelling case? Do I have the facts or the rationale or whatever means I have for convincing other people? So it gives you a little diagnosis too, a way to look at, wait a minute, am I a good advocate for this new performance plan at work? Am I a good advocate for why my family should go here on vacation? Am I clear? Am I convicted? Am I credible? And do I have a compelling case? Make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So clarity. I think I might have this be more discussion oriented, but why is that important for advocacy? What is clarity might be another question you would ask first. What does it mean when you're clear on something? What problems might occur due to a lack of clarity? What kinds of things must you be clear about? How could, look at this, internal consistency. How could the POM model help you achieve clarity? These chapters aren't just a loose confederacy of independent things. They're a family, a suite of things. I don't know, I'm being goofy. So any thoughts on this, on clarity?
I think these are great questions that I'm going to use.
Steal.
No, I can already envision in my mind just kind of, there's more to the chapter than just your four. But you could just, for my 1 hour discussion, which is such little time, you could just break down the 4 pillars here in a really, really great discussion.
Yeah, and I would love feedback on it, because this is a real revision in the last year or two of this chapter. And for me, it was kind of interesting, but I became more clear about advocacy. And that's when this model came about. It's like it hit me with greater clarity on what's involved with effective advocacy. So it's hard to write a chapter. It's hard to write a book if you aren't clear. And sometimes you have to fight for clarity. And I guess that's the real lesson here. Clarity isn't like, the clouds part and the heavens open and you see the truth. I mean, it's like what my sophomore in high school composition teacher would say: the best writing is rewriting. If you want to write clearly, then you have to write poorly first, and then you refine it and work on it. And clarity takes work. It really does. Sometimes it just hits you in those shower moments or something like that, but even then it hits you because of a lot of the preparation you did before that moment. Mm-hmm. So clarity.
It'd be interesting as an exercise, if you wanted to have more of an active learning, getting people in groups, you could, provide sort of a case for a small group and have them go through these elements as well. Mm-hmm. So, what does clarity look like with this particular case if you're trying to advocate? You could do that too, or even break up groups. Like you focus on clarity, you focus on the conviction piece, you focus on the compelling case. I don't know, just.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I mean, and I love the creativity that, you would bring to this activity, because there is no one way to teach this stuff. So yeah, what if you had a case study? All right, what's an issue that we all want to maybe advocate? What's your class project? What clarity do you have around it or need around it? What clarity have you acquired on this topic as we've gone through it? How convicted are you as a class on this issue? Maybe you're going along, maybe you're not all fired up about it, but everybody else seemed to like it, so you agreed with it, but you don't personally feel like you're there. Or maybe you weren't there, but now as you've learned more about it, you've identified more about it with the issue, and you're more convicted around it. maybe you're not clear on it, and that's why you don't have a sense of conviction on this. And, but just some things, what does it mean to have conviction? And how is it different from being enthusiastic about something? What effect does conviction have on others? When you're convicted, what effect does it have on others? There's a podcast that's been really popular in the last couple of years called Startup. And it's all about this guy. He's starting up his business, and it's just following him through the startup process. And he meets this guy who's a big-time venture capitalist for startup firms. And he tells this story about, conviction. And that I'm not giving the details quite well, but the idea was that conviction is not when you're looking at your audience member to see if they agree. Conviction is looking through your audience member to the wall behind them because you see it vividly, clearly on the wall that this needs to happen. And I was almost like modeling conviction when I was talking about it purposefully so that somebody could stop and rewind just about 12 seconds and kind of see me being convicted about the wall behind you. Like that's what it looks like. Because there's times where I'm like, we should definitely do this, like today I was talking to a friend of mine and I told him, I said, I was trying to sell him on this idea. And I said, so Mike, feel free to disagree with me or don't feel like you have to do this. And he's like, Adam, let me stop you right there. Like you just weakened your whole sales pitch to me,
Yeah.
Because I wasn't convicted. Like, Mike, you got to do this,
Yeah.
Last night I was talking to a friend of mine and I said, I have come across the best movie scene of all time. He's a movie buff. I'm a movie buff. And I was like, so I'm going to send you a clip from this movie and you got to watch it as if it was the best movie scene ever made. Otherwise you're not going to see my point. He's like, well, send it to me. I'll watch and I'll call you back, And so, is it the best movie scene ever made? That's hard, that's hard to quantify. But was it a good movie scene? Yes. And could I build the case for it? Yes. And was I convicted that it was such a good scene? And anyway, after the show, I'll share it with you and just if you're interested. But how do you know when you're convicted? How do you know? What is that feeling you get when you're like you have that level of conviction on something versus when's been a time you faked it? You acted like you were all rah-rah for something and you got all these other people excited about it. And then you're like, no. Weddings, this happens at weddings. This is probably not going to be popular to say. But it's like these two people, they're standing up there and they're convicted because they are about to make vows, lifetime, significant vows. And then, like a year later, they're divorced.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not convinced. That's kind of like also one of the root words in here, convicted, convinced.
Right.
I'm like, I want to put my wedding gift in a 1-year escrow. And so if you guys don't make it even a year, I get my gift back, That's what I think should happen. But that's not really.
That happens more and more these days, it seems.
No, right? All right. So there's a business idea. So that's a little bit about conviction. And so this is a model, like, how convicted are you? Are you superficially convicted? Like, yeah, that's great. Employees are our most important asset, and then you don't really mean it because when it comes time to make cuts or you have to make business decisions, you cut your employees or something like that, The customer is always right. Okay, well, what happens when two customers are fighting with each other and they disagree with each other? Which one's right? Anyway, so there's superficial conviction where you just give your words. Oh, I'm willing to give my words, but I'm not willing to stand behind it. But then there's the level of conviction where you're willing to make yourself uncomfortable to advocate for something. Like, it's not the popular thing to do, but I really believe in it that I'm going to make myself a little vulnerable here. I'm going to make myself a little uncomfortable. I'm going to speak up. Because I don't think this is right. And then there's times where you risk your own survival to advocate for something. It's like, Jerry Maguire in that movie with Tom Cruise, he wakes up all inspired with this new way to be a sports agent, and he writes this manifesto and he sends it out to the whole department and gets fired for it. You know, he took a risk doing it. And so, by the way, actually, this should be reversed. This model is an error. I got to fix this. Safety should be the third level. He's risking his safety. Jerry Maguire's risking his safety. But the next level is risking your own very survival, which only very few things rise to that level of importance. Somebody might say, that's a hill to die on. I'm willing to risk my very survival for this. If you risk your safety, it doesn't mean you're going to get hurt. It just means you're making yourself vulnerable. You know, it's like, I'll take the chance of not wearing my seatbelt. That doesn't mean I'm going to die in a car accident, but I'm risking it. Whereas when you're risking your survival, you are one of the doctors in the Congo when there's an Ebola outbreak, and you're working with those patients who, if they get any blood or any stuff on you, I'm avoiding saying vomit, like that's a horrible thing to say. You can get infected with this deadly disease yourself, but you're doing it because you are you are advocating health. You are advocating being a doctor and the Hippocratic Oath and all of that. You're willing to risk your own survival for it. I'm willing to go to war. I'm willing to volunteer for the army because I believe in this. I am risking, and this is just a little way to assess how much do we care about things. And not everything can be full on advocacy. What are those things that you're willing to risk your survival for? Again, flip these last two. I hate that happened, but, and it's sort of like a dial. And there's certain things that it's like, Adam, can you get on board with this? Not really. No, I mean, I do it because I like you, but I'm not really going to go to bat for it. People ask you to be on a board of directors and you're like, you can't say this, but you're like, I don't know that I care about that issue that your nonprofit deals with. I don't know that that's important to me. Maybe I could get there, but it's like, we should decide. We should combine this with your plate analysis activity from the purpose chapter. All right. Credibility. How effective is advocacy if the speaker's not credible? What causes you to find someone to be credible? And these guys that I used to study under, I reference them a lot. Mickey Connolly and Richard Reinashek, they have this model called 4 pillars of credibility. And it really helped me understand credibility a lot more, and then how to build my credibility a lot more. I don't know if I reference it in the field guide or in the chapter. And if not, I can talk about it more. Maybe I'll make a little video on it if they wouldn't mind me, sharing their model. What are some ways to establish your credibility? Yeah. Oh, here's the model right here. This is it. This is the 4 pillars of credibility. So this is Mickey Connolly and Richard Reinashek of Conversant, www.conversant.net. And so the idea is that these are the 4 pillars of credibility, and then 2 of them are immediate, but they don't necessarily last. They may go as fast as they came, and some of them aren't immediate, but if you get them, they last a long time. And the other thing is their definition of credibility, and their definition of credibility is like this, and I'll say it twice because it takes a minute to make sense of it. Credibility is when people are willing to exchange their assessment of you for engagement with you. Credibility is when people will exchange their assessment of you for engagement with you. And we all know that feeling where people are sizing us up. They're like, well, where have you done before? Who do you know? What degrees do you have? And then there's this moment where somebody's like, all right, Jennifer, I'm going to tell you what's really going on here. You're like, here's my real problem. Like there's that moment where they're like, all right, I think you could help me with this. And so the way this model works is that credentials, like a degree, right away, it offers a little bit of credibility. Or, if you have those certain letters, like after your name for whatever industry you're in, it's like you've gone through the certification process, you're credentialed. So right away, you're like, okay, that gives me a little sense that this person knows what they're doing. But then you get to know them and you're like, oh my gosh, they don't know anything. Like someone with a PhD, you're like, you got a PhD in this, you must know tons. And then you meet them, you're like, oh my gosh, you're not very, like, you know a lot about this, but you're not very bright. You're kind of okay.
Yeah.
So credentials could mean you're credible, but that's not what makes them endure. So the next thing is associations. And by this, they don't mean necessarily professional, like you're a member of this association of bankers or this association of doctors. It means, who do you know that has credibility? Who are you associated with that I also find to be credible? So I could say, oh, I used to work for, Martin Luther King Family's Foundation. And you're like, oh, well, that's hugely credible. And then, so yeah, like, come work with us too. And then I work with you, and then you realize, oh my gosh, yeah, I could see why you used to work with them, because you were obviously fired. They obviously, because you're an idiot. So you get that initial kind of thing. Oh, you studied under this person, or you worked for that company, and then you went independent. Oh, that has some name recognition, some credibility. And then you meet them and find out, oh, they don't know, they aren't really credible. It could be, but they may not be. You can lose it really fast, as quickly as you got the credibility. But the real enduring credibility takes a while to develop, but it lasts. And so the first pillar for that is demonstrating essential understanding. You understand the essence of the situation. You understand what people are going through, and you've demonstrated that. And so, like, there's always this occasion where you might have gotten advice. You have a problem and you went to somebody for advice, and they're like, well, did you do this? And did you do that? And it's the most obvious things. Of course you did those things. And you're like, okay, this person's not going to be very helpful. But you can't say, oh yeah, dude, you're asking me all the obvious questions. Thank you very much. Yeah, you're not helpful to me. But instead you're like, oh, thank you, good idea. Even though you're like, okay, mental note, don't ask this guy for advice again. But then you talk to somebody else and you're like, their questions really show that they get what my concerns are. Their questions helped me understand my own situation better. They've demonstrated an understanding of the essence of what my problem is. That's credibility. That's where real credibility comes from. And it doesn't matter your degree. It doesn't matter your association. It just matters that you have this ability to get it, to listen, to tune into what that person's saying. And then the last pillar of credibility flows immediately from that. I understand the essence of what you're doing. Now, can I make some insights? Can I offer you some next steps that you could take action on, that you would go, oh yeah, I think that actually might work. I'm willing to try that. I hadn't thought of that before. And that these are the enduring sources of credibility. And so if you want to build credibility, you could start your speech by saying, well, as somebody who graduated from this prestigious university, and as somebody who's worked and name dropped some names, I've worked with these people, you can start maybe getting some credibility that way. But you're really going to maintain the credibility if you can understand the essential concerns of your audience, and then you make suggestions that other people would think of and go, yes, I could do something with that. That makes sense. I agree with your plan. So that's credibility. I got to rush because I know we got to finish up. So let's just get to the last one, a compelling case. You got to have a compelling case in addition to those three things we've talked about. So what are the elements of creating a compelling case? What do you need? What do you, when somebody builds a compelling case for you, what do they bring? What did you find compelling? Data. They looked through the different solutions and compared them and reasoned out which was the best solution, and they shared that with me. They made the ethical case for why we need to do something. What are those elements of a compelling case? And what's your approach to making that case? Like, how do you go about making that case? What information should you present in what order? What sources should you cite? Should you use visuals? Should you read quotes? What is your approach to making that compelling case? And then how do you assess if a case is compelling enough? At what level will you say, you know what, okay, this is compelling enough. This will compel others to buy into taking care of the planet, as your next thing would be sustainable environmentalism. So, that's the example there. So that's really the kind of nuts and bolts of the chapter. Any thoughts or questions before we have to dismount?
No, I think it's great. I'm so excited to dive in and bring it to the class, or hear what the class has, what they make of it, and what their insights are. I think that's one thing that I've been trying to do too, is ask them if they agree or disagree, or if they have any other articulation of some of the principles that you've outlined. And I actually, going back to the purpose chapter, I do recall we talked a lot about, do you agree with the assessment that it's something you discern, not so much create? And I actually I did have one person sort of challenge that a little bit.
I think it's great.
Most didn't, but one said, well, the more I think about that, and he had his own reasoning. So anyway, I think it's good to offer that up too.
I thoroughly agree with this. I thought about this the other day. Like, I'm going to quote myself. Like, I thought of this in my head. That just because you disagree with me does not mean I'm wrong. Or just because I disagree with you does not mean you're wrong. And I know that sounds kind of obvious, like, oh, that's not like super, like, oh, wow, no one's ever said that before. But it just was really clear to me that there's room for us to disagree and not make each other wrong. And I think we forget that. I think we have it in our heads that disagreement means wrong. And so I really do want participants in your class to engage the material and disagree with it if they genuinely do, if they thought about it and they understood it and they tried to kind of see things from maybe my vantage point and they still disagree, then I think that's totally legitimate, and it's not illegitimizing of me or whatever. And so it's that exploration that I think is really great. And so I encourage constructive disagreement. I don't encourage destructive disagreement.
Right.
Because you'll get to a chapter where somebody will say, like, what is the chapter? Somebody did this the other day, reason chapter, and you'll get to this, and I might share the story then, forget I shared it now, but somebody was like, well, some of the best leaders aren't reasonable. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, they weren't reasonable. They were, I could see why they said that, but then my response to that would be, what if they were more reasonable than everybody else at the time? What if Martin Luther King was talking about a vision that was the only reasonable vision for equality and how people should be treated, and everybody else was unreasonable? So that's not to say that the person disagreeing with me was wrong to disagree. It was just meant to say that just because he disagreed with me didn't mean I was wrong for saying that reason should be a capacity for leaders. There's lots of room in between. So anyway, for what it's worth, I'm all amped up because I'm excited about this. I love these conversations with you. I love kind of being able to, go through your program with you. And I'm so appreciative that you allow us to record these so that other people who are starting out with positive leadership get the benefits of it. So thank you for that. And yeah, I know we got to go, but any last comments from you, or we good?
No, I mean, I just would encourage anyone else out there to, and you've said this before, but I'll just reiterate it, that if they come across a great video or a great article or a great exercise that worked really well, to share it with you so that we can hear about it. Because like you said, I think there's so many ways to interpret the chapters and to teach teach the content or facilitate the content, I should say. So
Mm-hmm.
the ideas coming, and then we can put them on the resource page.
Do you have like just 1 second, or do you have to go? Because
I have 5 minutes.
okay, so I won't need that. But one of the programs that I work with sent this. Let me just find it real quick. So this would be an example of a really great idea. Let me just share my screen with you. They got this idea from another program, but still, I'll give them credit. So can you see these pictures?
Oh, yeah.
So what this is, these are like a jar, and they make a jar for each member of their leadership program. And they kind of have this really nice little card here that has the model for positive leadership. And what they do is they came up with one symbol for each of the capacities. And so they put this in everybody's jar as they go through the capacities. So this compass here could be like, maybe that's for purpose, you know? Or these Legos might be community building, or this rubber band is for resilience, you know? It depends, you know. So the idea, yeah. And so then at the end of the year, they give people their jars. They hold the jars for everybody because you don't want your participants having to bring these back and forth. But then it's kind of like a keepsake of the 7 capacities. So this is Leadership Somerset, and then they provided their own little instructions here, you know. The mirror represents authenticity and some notes.
That's really, really, see, that's a great idea. What a wonderful idea.
And then this came from, I said, that's an awesome idea. And they said, well, that idea came from Leadership Siouxland. And I forgot, but they're right. I shared this. So the idea of sharing these things makes it better. You know what I mean? So it just mirrors that point that you were making. That was my whole reason for sharing those little jars.
That's a great idea. That I kind of want to steal.
Yeah, steal that idea. And then I was even wondering too, if people would want us to, really try to come up with cool little like Monopoly type pieces for each capacity and make its own little thing. And then we could just pull our resources together to make it really nice. Or, if people want to keep it kind of like with the jar and the things, that's cool too. Cause some people really like that homespun, organic feeling of something. So
yeah.
Anyway, great
Thank
stuff.
You for sharing that.
Yeah, and more to come, I'm sure. So just thanks again, Jennifer. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Bye.
Bye now.